Welcome to Adam's Athenaeum. Let's take a look together through the news and records of our times as we try to shed light upon the unvarnished truth. Thanks for coming back to listen to this episode where I will try my best to explain what critical race theory is, otherwise known as CRT or critical race training. Critical race theory, or CRT as I will be calling it, is a practice or a small part of a larger political movement led by Marxist revolutionaries, and it is being taught in your children's schools. Perhaps not all of them, but by criticalrace.org's own admission, they explain how this theory is being taught in the classroom. We will delve into that deeper a little later on, but this video is being made because I am sick of seeing mainstream and corporate media publications and websites get away with saying the following. From MSN.com, we checked and they are right. CRT is not being taught in schools, technically. However, in their article, if you scroll down far enough, you can read this broader perspective being taught through CRT instruction in K-12 schools can be demonstrated by educators and administrators across the nation. Officials from the East Side Community School in Manhattan, for example, passed out literature asking parents to reflect on their whiteness, the New York Post reported. From FoxNews.com, Minnesota Dem claims CRT not being taught in schools despite teachers' pledge to keep teaching it. So in Minnesota, at least one reference Democrat seems to argue that CRT is not being taught in schools. However, the teachers, and let's be honest, probably the teachers' unions, have pledged to keep teaching CRT, even though it's supposedly not being taught. Now from abcnews.go.com, critical race theory in the classroom, understanding the debate. Some states are placing limitations on racial inequality education in schools. We will see later on what they mean when they say placing limitations on racial inequality in education in schools. First off, how do we get here? How do we go from a country where we all agreed that segregation was bad, racism was bad, and to treat all people as you want to be treated, to an agenda to push segregation, inflame racial or cultural differences, and it being acceptable for the media and politicians to lie to your face? Politicians lie to your face, yet if we lie to politicians, we can be arrested. Or better yet said by rapper Tom MacDonald in his song Snowflakes, in which he says, "If you lie to the government, they'll put you in prison, but when they lie to all of us, it's called being a politician." The answer to that is simple. It crept in through the very institutions we are arguing about. This change in society has been promoted, arranged, and pushed starting through the universities, and then those ideas follow into the workforce and start to permeate culture. The education system is pushing CRT, and now I will show you how. This does not mean every school or county or state is pushing this, but I'm telling you that in many places, in my opinion, one place is too many, but that in many places, CRT is being taught. Starting with Wikipedia, which I don't like using personally, but I do like to show you how the media that you use affects your judgment of news and politics. If one of the biggest known websites can't provide us with accurate and easy to understand facts, then why should we trust it? So we will start there and jump down this rabbit hole to see where we end up. So according to Wikipedia, critical race theory, or CRT, is a cross-disciplinary intellectual movement that began in the United States in the post-civil rights era as 1960s landmark civil rights laws were being eroded and schools were being resegregated. With racial inequalities persisting even after civil rights legislation was enacted, CRT scholars in the 1970s and 1980s began reworking and expanding critical legal studies theories, or CLS, on class and economic structure and the law, to interrogate the role of U.S. law in perpetuating racism. They said that the liberal notion of value-neutral U.S. laws had a significant political role in maintaining a racially unjust social order, where formerly colorblind laws continue to have racially discriminatory outcomes. So to be honest, that almost sounds like a virtuous goal of the critical legal studies theories. Let's see if that holds up when compared to the information found on criticalrace.org. CriticalRace.org is an extension of the 1619 Project, which is a lie, founded on a lie, and has since been debunked, in which claims were made that America had a different, more racist beginning than any could imagine. I will get into that more a little bit later. At criticalrace.org, we can read what CRT is according to them. What is critical race theory? They ask on their homepage, followed by an outgrowth of the European Marxist school of critical theory. Critical race theory is an academic movement which seeks to link racism, race, and power. Unlike the civil rights movement, which sought to work within the structures of American democracy, critical race theorists challenge the very foundations of the liberal order, such as rationalism, constitutional law, and legal reasoning. Critical race theorists argue that American social life, political structures, and economic systems are founded upon race, which, in their view, is a social construct. Systemic racism, in the eyes of critical race theorists, stems from the dominance of race in American life. Critical race theorists and anti-racist advocates argue that because race is a predominant part of American life, racism itself has become internalized into the American conscience. It is because of this, they argue, that there have been significantly different legal and economic outcomes between different racial groups. Really? Did I just read all of that correctly? Yep. Wow, that's drastically different from what Wikipedia said. So these people admit, as I said earlier, that this is Marxism, an outgrowth of the European Marxist school of critical theory, which seems to link racism, race, and power. That sounds awfully close to Hitler, actually. Using power to perverse what racism and race actually mean? They continue. Critical race theorists challenge the very foundations of the liberal order, such as rationalism, constitutional law, and legal reasoning. So to me, it almost sounds like they admit they are crazy and have no respect for American law, and they have no rationale or reasoning capabilities. They go on to say, what are the implications of critical race theory? Advocates of anti-racism and critical race theory use this focus on race to emphasize the importance of identity politics. Movements such as the wave of anti-racist actions at universities and Black Lives Matter are some ways in which identity politics and critical race theory have captured the nation's attention. So I'm reading anti-racists, as they call themselves, use race to emphasize the importance of identity politics. That's a bit back-ass words, as the saying goes, or as rapper Tom MacDonald would say in his song, Fake Woke. They use violence to get peace and wonder why it isn't working. That's like sleeping with the football team to try and be a virgin. How can you claim to not be a racist, but only see race in news stories, only talk about race, and use race to emphasize the importance of identity politics? And once again, they claim and admit that these types of actions take place on universities. Alright, YouTube, and you far lefties who live in La La Land and say CRT is not being taught in the classrooms, here's what I promised you earlier. More proof from the Marxists themselves detailing how CRT is applied in the classroom. In the wake of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent Black Lives Matter protests, multiple universities have responded to campus activists and outside groups demanding anti-racist actions be taken. Colleges and universities have responded in 9 different ways. Let me pause just for 1 second, real quick, to point out just one small, tiny detail. They once again admit that colleges have responded in these 9 different ways. So I will not stand to hear that this ideology is not being practiced in schools. Number 1, changing admissions policies. In an effort to ensure greater equality of outcome, several universities have taken steps to make their admission processes more equitable. These actions can range from scrapping standardized tests to adding a diversity or equity scorecard to applications. What this says is, if you have been politically paying attention to the world, that is, Affirmative actions programs will use race qualifiers to ensure greater equality of outcome for Black and brown students to get into schools and programs their grades would normally not qualify them for. We can thank Obama for these programs. What this means is that if a white or an Asian student scores high enough on their SATs to be admitted into a school, their expected performance will be raised higher than the test scores they got. Apparently, they're now not smart enough to get into the university. However, if you're a Black or brown person, because they're trying to keep up their quota and their numbers, it almost doesn't matter how low of a score you get. You will now be qualified to get into these schools based upon your race only. Doesn't matter if you're not smart enough to be there, if you won't be able to keep up with the workload. You're going to be put ahead of those who earned the right to be there. Number 2, implementing anti-racism, bias, and diversity training to get students, faculty, and staff to understand their implicit biases. Institutions have required them to go some form of training, ranging from small group orientations to full-blown classes. Now, if you have applied to places such as Amazon or any major lefty-supporting company, such as Starbucks, you may have had to go this diversity and inclusion training. For laymen and laywomen, this means if you are white or Asian, you are told that your skin color makes you privileged. You don't understand other races. You are an oppressor. You must be more understanding of people's feelings and emotions. The next topic reads, changing curriculum requirements. Critical race theorists need to expose the broader public to the supposed racial biases imbued in long-standing institutions. To do this at a collegiate level, advocates have been pushing for changes in the undergraduate curriculum, ranging from a mandatory class on anti-racism to forcing instructors to embed anti-racist ideology in their class material. Now, any decent human being will read this and say, this is not needed. We as humans should be able to spot racism in its ugly forms, call it out, and condemn it wholeheartedly, and seek justice for its victims. Trying to brainwash me as though I'm some kind of an oppressor? You're just fooling yourself. Reading on. Instituting disciplinary measures. University administrators have taken steps to clamp down on academic freedom, revising their codes of conduct and commitments to academic freedom by inserting vague language on hate speech and racist language, among other measures. Here we go again, admitting that this is taught and brought to life through the school system, the universities. So schools have to supersede the Constitution, as well as the Supreme Court, and make rules about hate speech and supposed racist language? I didn't know they had such governing authority regarding our First Amendment. As Tom MacDonald would say in his song Fake Woke, censorship's an issue because they choose what they erase. There's a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate. Let's keep reading. Politically supporting anti-racist activism. Institutions have either donated money to political groups like local Black Lives Matter chapters or redirected students to politically biased organizations in an effort to placate campus activists. Oh, great. So schools have donated money to BLM and others who rioted, burned, looted, raped, and destroyed our cities last year. The next section reads, funding critical race theory programs and research. Institutions have poured in thousands, if not millions of dollars into research on critical race theory and racism, ranging from grants and fellowships to new anti-racist institutes. Or follow the money, as the saying goes, right? Let's read on. Reimagining Policing. In response to campus protests, university administrators have taken steps to either disarm or defund their police departments, often replacing them with unarmed officers or mental health workers. This is stupid. I'm almost sorry to say it, but this is a dumb idea, and I can already tell you how the situation will play out. Cops get a call for a psych patient with a gun threatening others in public. Cops say, "Screw you, you disarmed us," and hired mental health workers. Unarmored mental health workers arrive to talk to said patient, who is crazy and irrational. Patient then runs away, as no police were there to chase him or stop him, and any survivors were already shot by Mr. Crazy Pants. So yeah, honey, we need cops whether you like them or not. They continue, providing anti-racist resources. Universities have compiled lists of resources, often making books like How to Be an Anti-Racist and White Fragility free for students, as well as live programming for anti-racist initiatives. How dare they reference white fragility? It is a racist book written by a person who hates themselves and America. Go ahead and read White Fragility. I could only stand to read about 20 pages of this author's narcissistic talk on white people. Taking symbolic actions. Some institutions have not yet taken substantive action to mandate curricular changes or fund critical race theory research. However, they have started anti-racist action committees or renamed supposedly offensive buildings to placate the demands of students. So now we can see where this push to destroy buildings and statues comes from. Alright, so in my opinion, this is complete Marxist ideology BS that should be argued against by parents at local school board meetings in a peaceful and respectful manner. Marxism is a form of socialism and communism, all of which are failed ideologies that have never worked or prospered for its citizens. If you need more background information on those ideologies, check out my channel for more of those videos. Lastly, what is the 1619 Project? Well, when I looked that up on Google, I get the 1619 Project is a program organized by the New York Times in 2019 with the goal of re-examining the legacy of slavery in the United States and timed for the 400th anniversary of the arrival in America of the first enslaved people from West Africa. It is an interactive project by Nicole Hannah-Jones, a reporter for the New York Times, with contributions by the paper's writers, including essays, poems, short fiction, and a photo essay. Originally conceived of as a special issue for August 20th, 2019, it was soon turned into a full-fledged project, including coverage in the newspaper and on its website. The New York Times describes the project as a major initiative observing the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery. The project was almost exclusively contributed to by Black academics, journalists, and writers, as a Wikipedia summary. So I will then click on the next link, which takes me to libertyscholar.org, to an article titled The 1619 Project, What It Is and Why You Should Not Let Your Children Read It. In it, Maria Bugnano writes, and I'm sorry if I messed your name up, at the heart of nuanced social justice training lies a subset of ideologies most infamously aligned with critical race theory and the Marxist movement. This training is known as the 1619 Project, and the notably Marxist ideologies which support its founding principles would make any well-read scholar write off the project as political doctrine that cannot exist outside the realm of metaphorical fiction. Despite its lack of historical accuracy, the doctrine has been introduced academically and professionally across America. As parents protest the adoption of this material by their local schools, school children are getting a taste of the true intentions behind the social justice movement. The 1619 Project was founded by Nicole Hannah-Jones, an American investigative journalist and contributing writer for the New York Times. In the recent past, Hannah-Jones has been very vocal regarding her opinions on contemporary civil rights issues and has even gone as far as to publicly demand reparations for American minorities, herself included. This politically advantageous doctrine supposes much more than any revolutionary civil rights issue. In fact, a complete upheaval of American history is more on par with this trend. Most school children can recite the founding date of the United States of America, July 4th, 1776. But a searing project from the New York Times Magazine changes that date to August 20th, 1619, the day that 20 enslaved Africans first arrived on Virginian soil. The Times covered this essay by Hannah-Jones, describing the 1619 Project as an ongoing initiative from the New York Times Magazine that began in August 2019, the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery. It aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative. Now, I would also add that the first slaves who were sent to America from Africa were sold by indigenous Africans. Black men sold other black men to white men. Maria continues. The author of the project herself openly verified its fabrications, admitting that she got it wrong, and when she reported that one of the primary reasons the colonists revolted against England was to preserve the institution of slavery. Journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones claims now that she meant to say some of the colonists fought to preserve slavery, not all of them. The truth of the matter is, the disillusionment which encompasses the 1619 Project knows no bounds, leaving even the most rational of historical tales and testaments to America's founding twisted and radicalized to suit the whims of revisionists. Upon admitting to the doctrine's faults, the 1619 Project's founder and the New York Times have released statements regarding the misrepresentations and have since issued corrections to the project. However, thousands of copies of 1619 Project curriculum have been taught in schools across the nation, leaving countless American children with the notion that their country is racist. This curriculum, produced by the Pulitzer Center, is available to all schools for free. The main function behind implementing this type of an ideology to young students has long been thought to introduce the Marxist principles of collective responsibility, intersectionality, and victim mentality. Interestingly enough, not all socialists support the 1619 Project's implications. The World Socialist website labels the project as a fraud, criticizing the repeated alteration and dishonesty of the project. It is clear that none of the claims perpetuated by the 1619 Project hold legitimate historical accuracy, and it is questionable whether or not its founders even believe the doctrine which they perpetuate. Unfortunately, even though the flagrant fabrications and political motivations that fuel this curriculum are well reported, its presence in the K-12 curriculum is not. So in her writings, we can see that Nicole Hannah-Jones is leaving out some facts. She admits to having her theory wrong, and even the World Socialist website has discredited her and her ideology. I don't like socialists, but even we can agree here. And that's saying something. Even socialists can admit that these claims do not hold historical accuracy. It would seem that even the founders of these beliefs don't find them to be true. No longer can you hide the facts and the truth from people like me. I don't care about your mainstream narrative. I'm not a parrot. I'm here to shed light upon the unvarnished truth and bring light to the facts on these topics. I don't care if you're left or right. What we lost was reliable and honest news sources giving us the facts, so we can decide how we feel about something, based upon the truth of the matter. I showed you proof this theory exists. I showed you its admittance of it being taught. I showed you its practical nature and how it is applied. The rest is up to you to go research more and really think about the impact this has on our children and how their minds are framed. If you've been coming to my channel, then you know I don't like communism, socialism, or Marxism. They are failed ideologies which always lead to the deaths of innocent, hundreds of innocent, maybe even millions of innocent lives. If you want that ideology, go live where that ideology is practiced. This is the one country for freedom. I will not sacrifice my freedom for your emotions based off a fake narrative built upon lies. I will not allow America to be run by socialist commie dictators who run the country, not based off of logic or reason and wisdom, but out of a thirst for control, power, and most importantly, security over freedom. As always, if you like my videos and the progress I'm making as an independent creator, please share my videos to your friends and family, and don't forget to leave a thumbs up. If you care to continue this factual discussion, I look forward to seeing you in the comments section. If you try to tell me that CRT isn't real or isn't being taught, just piss off. No, really, just leave. I don't have time for people who refuse to accept reality. I look forward to having you back for my next episode. I'm going to keep the next video a surprise, so be sure to come back next Thursday. I'll see you then.